We welcome you to the CCRC webinar on dual enrollment equity pathways. Appreciate your time this afternoon. Just a couple of notes to get started. You can click the live transcript button to enable closed captioning, and the webinar will be recorded and emailed to all registrants, and it will also be posted on CCRC's website. During the discussion today, we'll have the chat open for comments, reactions, and discussions. Our colleague Davis Jenkins will be in the chat responding to as many questions as his fingers can type during this next hour together. But we may not have time to answer questions during our panel discussions, but we would encourage everyone to follow up with us at CCRC via email if you have more questions for us or for the panelists so we can pass along. So with that, I'm going to get into the webinar. Good to be with you all. My name is John Fink. I'm a Senior Research Associate and Program Lead at the Community College Research Center here at Teachers College, Columbia University. Our topic today is Deep Insights, Redesigning Dual Enrollment as a Purposeful Pathway to College and Career Opportunity. And I'm joined by five other wonderful presenters today, my colleague from CCRC, Sarah Griffin, and we have two dynamic partnerships that we learned about in our research this past year that we visited from Lee College in Goose Creek in Texas and Miami-Dade County in Florida that we'll be spending the bulk of our time in discussion with at the end of the hour. But before we get to that, Sarah and I will sort of start by presenting on this deep findings, this deep framework for dual enrollment. We'll give an overview of our research. We'll have some Q&A with each of these partnerships, and then we'll sort of discuss more of the leadership strategies as a group with the four panelists. I want to make sure that everyone's aware that we have these resources already posted online, our Dual Enrollment Equity Pathways publications. We have two publications that we released in October that will be sort of summarizing and discussing in today's presentations. And here's a QR code that you can scan to see all of our DEEP resources. So let me just start with an introduction to DEEP. A couple of things we need to know in terms of context is that dual enrollment in its many shapes and sizes, high school students taking college courses, has grown tremendously over the last 2 decades. And most of that growth has happened in community colleges. This is looking using fall enrollment data among students 17 or younger across the country. And what we see is that most of this expansion has been at community colleges. And even though this only goes through 2021, we know from the National Student Clearinghouse that we've seen double-digit growth of dual enrollment since 2021. And largely the expansion of dual enrollment has been a really positive thing for students and communities. Throughout that time, CCRC and many other researchers have really studied the benefits of dual enrollment. In fact, like 10 years ago, CCRC wrote a brief summarizing what do we already know about the benefits of dual enrollment. And since then, there's been What Works Clearinghouse, intervention reports really showing that particularly early college high schools and more intensive forms of dual enrollment have these really strong benefits for participants. But even looking nationally across all different types of concurrent, dual credit, dual enrollment course taking, we see that these students have really strong post-secondary outcomes. And this has all been sort of reviewed. So we know that these programs in large part really work and work well for students. But one of the challenges that we've also observed, and many other researchers have as well, is that we hear this phrase that their programs are privileged, and we know that there isn't equal access to dual enrollment programs. So this is some data we reported in our most recent research brief, looking at national analysis of school districts and showing that compared to high school populations, Native American, Black, Hispanic, multiracial, Pacific Islander, students with disabilities, and English learners are particularly underrepresented when you look at who's getting access to dual enrollment courses. We know that this issue is one in most, if not all, states in many districts. So its programs of privilege, but our research at CCRC and others that have done has shown that dual enrollment really can work for all students. Like in one study from Texas, finding that students who had a challenging transition into high school that were sort of falling behind academically, dual credit could really be a part of turning it around and propelling them into college. And then 2 other studies from our colleagues at CCRC looked and found that dual enrollment really had strong benefits for Black and Hispanic students both applying to more selective universities as well as entering into STEM and persisting in STEM major. So even though we have these programs of privilege and gaps in access, we know that dual enrollment really can benefit all students. So when we look at school districts nationally, one thing that we observe is that although gaps in access are widespread, there are about 1 in 5 school districts that have closed these gaps in access to dual enrollment. And with the Aspen Institute, we studied a subset of these partnerships that had just stronger outcomes in dual enrollment, both in terms of access and success for students of color. And we documented a series of strategies there around broadening access and connecting students to advising and providing high quality instruction. But the one thing that we observed from this research was that many of the colleges we visited were implementing guided pathways reforms, which really addresses another question that we hear in the dual enrollment space, which is this issue of random acts of dual enrollment. And so we're not just asking with this deep research, access for who, but we're also asking access to what. And as we've been tracking guided pathways implementation, as you can see in this map, it's pretty widespread among community colleges across the country. We've been really asking, what could this look like when colleges connect their guided pathways reforms to dual enrollment with an equity focus? And that was some of the questions motivating this research on DEEP, or dual enrollment equity pathways. First, we wanted to ask, what does it look like when guided pathways practices are implemented in dual enrollment programs? But also, what can we learn from early college high schools, which although are relatively smaller in scale, are quite effective, especially when they're focused on serving underrepresented communities. So what can we learn from those models that could be scaled to the millions of high school students taking dual enrollment courses? And finally, what is this? How can we build on what's already known around effective and equitable dual enrollment practices like we laid out with the Aspen Institute in the dual enrollment playbook? So the dual enrollment equity pathways framework really started as a review of those questions. What do we know from existing research? What are the subcomponents that we would expect to see at colleges and high school partners applying guided pathways to dual enrollment with a focus on equity? And we describe this as a 4-part framework that my colleague Sarah will talk about. But I want to emphasize that what this is leading to, this is just about access for who, but access to what. And really what this is leading to, as you can see in these arrows, is high opportunity post-secondary trajectory for high school students. And by that, we mean direct entry into a university towards a bachelor's degree program, entry after high school into a community college transfer pathway that's really well aligned to a specific bachelor's degree major at the university, so that all the credits are going to transfer and apply to that bachelor's degree program. That's what we mean by high opportunity transfer, and that's drawing from our work on guided pathways. And it's leading to a workforce program that's aligned to a high wage, high demand career in the local economy. So by describing this framework, we're really thinking about the ways that pathways practices can not just push students into college, but to really pull them into college pathways by tapping into students' interests, motivation, and aspirations. So my colleague Sarah is now going to talk about our field research and what we saw from these DEEP practices at Guided Pathways colleges.
Thank you, John, and hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Griffin, and I am a research associate at the Community College Research Center. And today I'll share what we learned about DEEP practices and associated leadership strategies, drawing from the field research that we did in Florida and Texas. So in the 2022-2023 academic year, we visited 6 community colleges and 12 of their high school partners for dual enrollment. And we conducted interviews with 291 people across these sites. We selected community colleges in Florida and Texas further along in their guided pathways implementation. And we also used statewide administrative data to identify unique pairs of colleges and high schools that had increased access to dual enrollment for Black, Hispanic, and low-income students, and increased early college success for these student groups. Our interviews focused on understanding the types of practices that these partnerships were using and the extent to which they were aligned with the 4 areas of the DEEP framework. We also used the interviews to understand how colleges and their K-12 partners we're implementing dual enrollment practices across sectors. So what did we learn from our field research? In the first deep practice area, outreach to underserved students in schools, we found that dual enrollment programs were very intentional on serving underserved schools and communities, and particularly Title I schools, schools in rural areas, and schools serving higher proportions of racially minoritized or low-income students. A lot of the outreach efforts were focused in middle and even elementary schools so that students and families were being exposed to dual enrollment early on. And a lot of these activities were embedded in initiatives like AVID, but there were also presentations and events that were hosted specifically for younger students. The connection to the community and to the parents was more common among the K-12 schools that we visited, but also a very important part of the college's work. And we found that partnerships have created opportunities to directly interact and communicate with parents about dual enrollment, and in doing so, thoroughly explain what dual enrollment entails, and equally important, make parents feel involved in their children's education while still upholding FERPA guidelines. And then lastly, some of the sites that we visited, and particularly those in Florida, were using alternative measures like high school grades and high school GPA to determine students' eligibility for dual enrollment instead of using placement exams. And leaders at these sites said that since shifting to alternative measures, they have expanded access to dual enrollment without a measurable decline in student success. In the third area of the DEEP framework, which is aligning dual enrollment courses to further education and careers, we found that a fundamental practice is creating an inventory of advanced coursework, including dual enrollment courses, or in other words, identifying what courses are offered and where, and whether these courses are being optimized for students to take advantage of them. For example, by determining if there are enough qualified instructors available to teach the courses that are being offered. We also learned that partnerships are mapping dual enrollment courses offered at high schools to specific college degree programs at the community college and local four-year institutions. And these are often referred to as program maps and are published so that families and students have access to them. And finally, something that really stood out among our findings are the efforts that districts and high schools have made to embed dual enrollment courses into high school academies or other high school career-oriented programs so that they are part of students' default four-year high school education. This next practice area includes efforts to provide dual enrollment students with opportunities to explore their interests, receive advising from community colleges, and develop plans for further education and careers. And we found that K-12 schools are showcasing dual enrollment and post-secondary degree programs as part of the exploration and decision-making process for middle schoolers. So while middle school students are being exposed to their high school options, we found that they were also being introduced to how available dual enrollment offerings lead to different programs and career paths. In the area of advising, we saw different approaches, but what stood out as being particularly beneficial for students were more intensive models of advising, where students received regular advising sessions or checkpoint advising, where students received advising at certain credit benchmarks. And coupled with this practice, we found that college advisors were helping dual enrollment students at least create a preliminary plan of the courses that they wanted to take and aligning these to a specific college degree or credential of interest to them. And then lastly, coordinating advising among high school counselors and college advisors helped to ensure that students were receiving the appropriate guidance and being supported by both their high school and local community college with planning their dual enrollment courses. In the final deep practice area, providing high quality instruction and academic supports to dual enrollment students, we learned that sites are slowly introducing students to college coursework and providing support by starting students with college success courses or survey courses as opposed to more advanced courses. And this has helped high school students adjust to the expectations and the rigor of college level coursework. Providing timely support to students was also emphasized so that students can get the help they need when they are struggling, And usually this involved high levels of coordination between instructors, advisors, and high school counselors across individual partnerships. Several of the schools we visited, especially the rural schools, offered asynchronous online coursework. And these schools were helping students take these courses by providing students with dedicated class time to do their work and having proctors present during these class periods so that they could assist students when they needed help. And then finally, we also saw examples of how colleges were ensuring the quality of their dual enrollment programs by providing instructors with professional development that was specifically related to teaching dual enrollment students, and by monitoring the quality of dual enrollment courses. So those were the practices that we observed across the sites that align with the DEEP framework. And as I mentioned, we also investigated the how behind the partnerships that we visited, and there were several themes that emerged. The first thing we observed was that partners were getting on the same page and establishing a shared mindset to guide the implementation of their dual enrollment programs. And the first mindset that we observed was a prioritization of dual enrollment as a pathway to opportunity for students, particularly in more underserved communities, for upward mobility, and also for workforce development. We also saw a shared commitment towards that vision of student success with K-12 and college partners, even if it was not always expedient or if it raised pain points for the partnerships. We also observed a belief that all students can benefit from dual enrollment courses if they're done well and with the proper supports. And this is really a notable shift from the historical notion of dual enrollment being intended for only high achieving students. And then from the Texas sites that we visited, another mindset we observed was the idea that it is possible to expand college going and college completion by breaking down the vocational college divide and recasting high school CTE as a college track. And towards this end, we saw examples, as I mentioned earlier, of embedding college coursework into high school CTE career academies. We also learned that partnerships use different strategies to implement deep aligned practices on a large scale. And one essential strategy was finding win-wins and figuring out if partnerships are going to change their dual enrollment programs to broaden access, how both parties can benefit from doing so. For example, one college we visited wanted to expand dual enrollment, but their district partner was facing challenges with rising textbook costs and only had a limited amount of money to invest into dual enrollment. So this college and district worked together to find a solution. The college decided to expand open educational resources, which brought down the textbook costs for their district partner, and which also in turn helps this partnership to expand dual enrollment to more students. Making business processes more efficient, like moving from paper-based systems to online systems, was also a key element for some partnerships to help scale DEEP practices. From the college perspective, we also saw efforts to evaluate whether organizational structures are what they should be in terms of the number and type of staff to support their growing dual enrollment populations. And so we saw examples of how colleges have changed their staffing or created new roles to match their growth and provide support to more of their dual enrollment students. Similarly, we also found that partnerships were thinking about how to develop a pool of qualified instructors for dual enrollment. There were districts and schools we spoke with that talked about prioritizing dual enrollment teaching potential when hiring for instructors and how that has helped them to expand their dual enrollment programs. So now I will pass it back over to John, and he is going to kick off our first DEEP partnership Q&A.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'd like to welcome up Marissa Moreno and Susan Jackson, dynamic duo partnership from Baytown, Texas, Lee College and Goose Creek CISD. Just to sort of walk them up with some stats here. I thought it was 2,500 dual credit students at Lee College. Turns out it's 3,300 now and growing. About a third of Lee College's enrollment is dual credit. And Goose Creek is a major partner with dual credit. About a quarter of Goose Creek District's high school students are in dual credit or take some dual credit. And what's really impressive here is that 43% of those dual credit students continue on at Lee College after high school. So 43% come back. So courses in this partnership are primarily at the high school. It's mostly academic coursework, but there is a real robust CTE dual credit offering. Dual credit is no or very low cost to students and families. They've worked towards a shared advising model, which we'll hear about, and have implemented investments like stipends for dual credit instructors. So Susan, Marissa, so good to have you here. Susan, I'd like to start with you. You know, one thing we were really impressed with was Goose Creek's high schools being organized around career academies, and the way that you have embedded dual credit into those career academies. Can you walk us through how you did that and what's been the reception from students and parents?
Yes, thank you for having me. It's been a great journey. We've got 10 career academies in Goose Creek. They are selected through a lottery base to ensure that we have equity across the district. There's not an application kind of process. They apply for which academy that they would have that career interest in. And so really what we look at as career academies are really tight academies that we provide a pathway that allows the student to get their associate's degree. So if we're talking about our business academy, our students they start taking their dual credit courses in the 9th grade. We're working to get them college ready. And by the time they graduate, they can be in band, athletics, dance, and still, end up with their associate's degree.
And how do you get the word out about this to students and families, like in middle schools? Can you say more about that?
Yes, so parents and students have been very receptive to this pathway. We've designed them around all of our academies. So they go out and recruit starting in the 7th and 8th grade. They let the students know that they can graduate with an industry certification or a higher ed level 1, 2, or an associate's degree. These lead straight into bachelor's degrees. We've worked with our university partners to ensure that all of those courses are taken correctly. And then our students and parents realize that that's a savings of somewhere over $40,000 sometimes. So that's really amazing because you can get a degree here we charge the students $50 a semester. So for $200 a year, they can have an associate's degree, which is a very impactful thing for our community. We also publish a high school booklets option that's online that explain all the 10 career options and pathways that they can go through. And then we also talk about dual credit course offering nights. And then we use Avid and our tutors as a support to make sure they're successful.
And Marissa, I know you also oversee transfer at Lee College, and I know you're really focused on the transferability of dual credit courses. So how do you make sure that dual credit courses are transferring and applying to bachelor's degrees after high school?
And thank you for having me. Essentially, we were granted the TLLL Temple Foundation grant. And through that, we worked specifically with Goose Creek Partners with their admin and also their curriculum areas to make sure that we're looking at pathways. So we literally lined up our Lee College pathways to the high school endorsements, looked at how those high school endorsements within those, how they are aligned specifically to what the career options that the students are looking at, and then what dual credit courses fit into those. We work with our pathway leads here at Lee College to look at the top 5 transfer schools that we have that most of our dual credit, because through National Student Clearinghouse, we can pull that. Most of our dual credit students transfer to, as well as our regular general population students, which happens to be similar, right? And through that, we looked at which courses align specifically in each pathway so that if a student's a business major, they're taking the correct math. They're not taking college algebra. They're taking the finite math that they need for the top 5 schools. And so essentially we're looking at excess credit. We're making sure that it's not only transferable, but that it is actually applicable to their degrees. And so we worked really, really hard on that. And we have 5 pathway planners that we worked that are aligned. In Texas, we have the high school endorsements that they're required to select in 8th grade. And so we definitely wanted to make sure that we aligned it all the way through.
Thanks, Marissa. So we talked about alignment. Let's talk about advising. So you two and your institutions, you've done a lot of work to create shared advising across your 2 sectors. You have a shared advising model. So Marissa, let's start with you. Can you just give us that backstory and describe to us what is the advising model, the shared advising model, and what does it look like?
So essentially, Susan and I had a conversation over lunch and said, you know what, we need to look at possibly sharing some positions, and one of those, some of those positions were shared dual credit advisors, where essentially we share the cost of them. So they're Lee College employees, but we charge, so to speak, or we bill Goose Creek for the other half of them. So that advisor is assigned to a specific high school where they spend majority of their week alongside the college and career readiness counselor and or high school counselor, and work with them in tandem to ensure that the students are taking the correct courses, the college courses, but they're also getting dual credit courses. And so they learn a lot about the high school side of it, but they're working in tandem with the high school counselor to make sure that there is no misalignments in terms of being able to, one, graduate from high school, and then two, also get their college degrees, their college courses that are going to transfer and apply to an actual degree.
Susan, can you share about the shared advising model from your perspective? Like, what does that look like? What does it mean for the district?
Well, John, it's huge because for us, that was one of the things we talked about, is that no matter what we do, K-12 counselors just aren't equipped with the knowledge to really understand how to adequately advise a high school student. Because a lot of times you have GPA chasers that are running around just trying to take any course they can. And ironically, Marissa and I just had a meeting with all of our counselors in the district this morning on the same topic. But what it does is, by proxy, it really educates our high school counselors and grows them, because we have those shared advisors that are trained on the higher ed side that are now in our campuses on a daily basis, working with not only our students, but they're also working with our staff. So I think it's just a huge benefit.
And can you share about, either one of you, share about like just what does this look like from the student perspective, and how are you using the shared advising model to help students plan for a college pathway that's really connected to what they're interested in?
Well, Marissa, I'll let you start out with what we did this morning. I think that was pretty huge.
We essentially sit with the CCRCs, I'm sorry, college career readiness counselors. In Texas, we have that. And also the high school counselors, talk a little bit about the pathways. We gave them the actual pathway planners, the program pathway planners, and we talked to them about how it's important for them to align all of that going backwards. For a student, we have all of our program pathway planners on our website that are linked under our dual credit page, so that parents can have complete access to it, ask questions. It shows the dual credit courses that they need, and students are literally given this pathway planner when they're advised by either their CCRC and or their high school, their shared dual credit advisor. Super important that both are in the conversation, so that there is not a misalignment again. But even more so from an advising perspective, we work backwards. We say, okay, what is your intention? What is your degree that you want to go for? And what institutions, top 5 institutions you're looking at? And then let's work backwards from there to ensure that you are taking some courses, because not every business, school of business requires the same exact course. But if we can find similar courses to make sure that they're taking those right courses and that they are crosswalked with the school district, then we're in business.
And from my side, I mean, they've got that information for the students. They also have a really tighter information for our counselors, so that they have a guide to ensure that we are providing that counseling. Because even when you have a shared advisor, when you're talking about a campus of 2,200 students, and you have 25% of those kids taking dual credit courses, that's a lot of students. And so we want to ensure that not only we're not holding everything on the one poor shared advisor, that we have, a shared learning environment, which we are ensuring the correct information to those students. And they can't, if you're going to take something outside of that pathway, you have to, like she said, justify that information. And you have to provide that rationale about why you think that's appropriate. And if you can, then we're going to make that exception. But more importantly, anything that we do, I think Marissa and I would agree, it's better that we do it together, because, it doesn't matter who's in the room. They always try to pit mom against dad. And so when we're in the same room, they can hear it from both sides if they have questions.
Right. And speaking of mom and dad, we got 1 minute left. A question in the chat was, any tips for, helping communicate all this to parents, all these options, and what dual credit is and what it could be?
So we have several dual credit nights. We invite Lee College to be there. We have college and career nights. We always have them there as well. We send out flyers to parents, and then we have 8th grade meetings, 7th grade meetings. But most importantly, we get out to our service organizations. So we meet with Kiwanis and Rotary and Lions and Highlands Chamber and etc.
All right, Susan, Marissa, well, it's not the last that we'll hear of you, but I'm going to invite up our other dynamic duo panelists here from Miami. We've been talking about alignment and advising. We're going to get talking about outreach and instruction here in Miami with Lisette Rodriguez, Phil Giraffa from Miami-Dade County Public Schools, Miami-Dade College. Let me just say about this partnership, we were so impressed with our trip to Miami, where we got to visit 5 comprehensive Title I high schools in the Miami-Dade County Public Schools and 4 of Miami-Dade College's campuses. This is a large partnership. I thought it was 11,000 dual enrollment students. They just told me it's now up to 13,000 dual enrollment students from Miami-Dade County Public Schools, representing about 11% of the high school population. Together, they've achieved proportionality when it comes to the racial ethnic composition of high school students compared to who's taking dual enrollment courses, looking almost perfectly mirroring the diversity. Very impressive accomplishment. Just some more background. It's the modality. It's a mix of courses offered at the college versus at the high school. There's some online. It's mostly academic courses. It's free for students and families to take dual enrollment, but the college sort of eats some of that revenue and takes a little bit of a financial loss on dual enrollment. Miami is a large county. It has urban areas, but also more suburban and rural areas. And these two have had a lot to accomplish with each other the past couple of years. We'll hear more about, in particular, a push towards alternative methods for eligibility. So to start, Phil and Lisette, can you just give us this story about the shift to alternative measures since the pandemic, and why was this a crucial step for broadening access to dual enrollment?
Sure, absolutely. So good afternoon. Thanks for having me. So really, the state of Florida laid out the blueprint for us. I mean, when the pandemic hit, they issued an emergency order because students were not able to come to college campuses to test for dual enrollment eligibility. So what the state charged the Florida college system and their respective school boards with is come together, find a mix of alternate methods that you can agree upon mutually, and that will be your eligibility criteria moving forward until obviously the pandemic recedes. What we had done was we actually started collecting, we mobilized really, really quickly. We then mutually agreed to the alternate methods, but then we also started collecting data on success rates within these alternate methods and comparing them to students that actually came in on traditional testing. And what we found was students that were using alternate methods were equally successful in dual enrollment courses as those who were coming in on traditional college testing, the PERT, the Accuplacer. So it wasn't long after the pandemic started to recede that the state issued in fall 22 that alternate methods would now be allowed to be used as part of dual enrollment eligibility. And because we had already laid out the blueprint, as long as we were able to stipulate in the articulation agreement what we were going to use and to ensure that we disseminated it to each of the college campuses along with all of the high schools that we service in dual enrollment, it really created a springboard for students to come in to dual enrollment that traditionally were not great test takers, right? So it just really worked in our favor to move it forward. So that's kind of the story behind it.
Lisette, what would you add from your perspective on this shift towards alternative measures? What has it meant for the district?
Good afternoon, John. Thank you for inviting me here today. Very excited to share our work and the use of the alternative methods and flexibility with the statutory requirements for dual enrollment has been a huge way of increasing access to dual enrollment. And so what it means for the district is opportunities for students that in the past would have been not eligible to participate in dual enrollment because of the either GPA requirements or college entrance exam cut score requirements. Now we have some flexibility there that we're able to increase access to students that we know that have the potential. They're doing amazing in the program, and we're able to increase their participation and opportunities.
And Phil, there's something else that you did to build on this initial shift towards, away from just placement tests. You initially shifted towards the high school grades as alternative, but then you kind of did something on top of that, the College Connect. Can you share more about that? And, why was that needed to broaden access even further?
Sure, absolutely. So I think, with this whole movement of wanting to expand access for dual enrollment, I think Miami-Dade College, along with Miami-Dade County Public Schools, took a real inward look at how we can do this. And what we really went ahead and did is we just started pulling a lot of data on courses that historically were high achieving for dual enrollment students. And we really wanted to expose students to a myriad of courses that they might be interested in doing, exposing them to what college is: intro to criminal justice, hospitality, culinary, and just really looking at courses that, with a 2.5 GPA, we would be able to really expose students that did not have that traditional 3.0 GPA. And that really, really opened up the door to dual enrollment for many, many, many students across the county. I think that really contributed to the significant growth that we'd seen in the past year. And the data shows that these students are doing extraordinarily well in these courses. And it just was something, that we really wanted to look at and say to ourselves, why does it only have to be the student life skills course? Why can't it be other courses that students might gravitate to really get them started in their college career and expose them to college? So it just, again, was just a mutual inward exploration of how we can expand dual enrollment. And again, fortunately, we saw some alignment here and we were able to run with it.
And anything you'd add, Lisette, and kind of what was the result of this all?
So we started with the courses you see on the screen here that really most students need on a pathway to an AA, right? Your humanities courses, psychology course, speech communication course, and also included some of our an initiative that we started in partnership with the college to have a teaching academy in all of our high schools. And so having flexibility with those courses showed just in 1 year, after just last school year starting this initiative, a 48% increase overall in student participation in these targeted courses. And what was most rewarding is the students who we were impacting, in that looking at the subgroup of Hispanic students and African American students is where we saw the greatest growth. And so based on this success, we've now expanded the College Connect courses to align with our career academies, as Dr. Hidafa mentioned, within technology, criminal justice, graphic design, marketing, hospitality, et cetera, and areas that we know that students have high interest in, and there's going to be that student engagement and student interest. And for the school district, it's the added benefit that we can partner with the college to have visiting professors or blended courses where there's a college professor online with a high school teacher in person teaching the courses. We refer to those as my MDC live courses. And so that model provides the college level instruction and expertise with that high school teacher that has the pedagogy and skills to help students succeed and keep them on track within their dual enrollment courses that they're taking on the high school campus.
I'm glad you brought up, Lisette, what's happening in the classroom, because I know you've done this great work to broaden access, but one of the quotes that really stuck with me from our visit was the issue of the forever transcript, meaning that if a student gets a low grade in one of these classes, they're really stuck with that after they graduate high school. So can you share, Mo, about how you and the college partners are ensuring that you're not just expanding access, but you're also upping the supports to ensure that students are doing well in their dual enrollment coursework?
Absolutely. So that college transcript, we know, follows a student beyond high school graduation when they go and apply for a job or college admissions or graduate school admission or financial aid. And so that academic advisement piece at the high school level, at the college level for dual enrollment students is critical, so that they understand the importance of the courses. They understand what the requirements are for the course, what the drop deadline is, and what they need to do if they're not doing well in a course, so that that doesn't necessarily negatively impact their college transcript going forward. And starting this term, we've had some communication with the college and a plan in place for looking at specifically students that may fall through the cracks, that even though we have school site support, with our high school teachers and dual enrollment coordinators working with students and that academic advisement piece, that we still have a safety net for those students that begin the dual enrollment coursework, but may not have a success, and how we can help those students and then help gear them back up into dual enrollment in the future. I don't know if Dr. Hirafa, if you want to share some specifics, but.
So just a little backstory. So once upon a time, I used to work at Queens College in the City University of New York, and we had a policy within the first semester, really not even the first 24 credits, that if you were in danger of getting a D or an F, you had an option of either, we called it a PNC, a pass no credit option. So the idea behind the Forever Transcript, that this was going to be the case with dual, and we were expanding access, right, to dual, and we were exposing students to all of these wonderful courses that were going to really get them to really understand what college was. We needed to create an additional safety net. And, you know, the other thing with that was, it's great that we have alternate methods, but what if the alternate methods are, you know, not, they're great for getting you into dual enrollment, but maybe they don't deliver the exact preparedness that you would need to be successful in certain courses. So the NC grade, the no credit grade, what we were able to do is kind of articulate it in our agreement that we would, any student that got a D or an F within the first 7 credits of their college career, that D or an F would convert to a no credit, meaning it would not hit the GPA. So therefore it kind of alleviates that on the Forever Transcript. It will count as an attempt. They cannot repeat the course during their high school time in dual enrollment. And generally with this is that it takes us a semester. So this is the first semester that we did this. We probably won't get a full gamut of grades until mid-January. So we're still giving these students some time off. Our dual enrollment coordinators, along with the high school councils, are going to work with these students, kind of see how we can better support them, what kind of transpired during their semester that kind of caused the NC, and then see, obviously in the summertime, whether or not they be ready to do dual enrollment again. So this is a real alliance, mutual effort that, you know, we are going to, this is fall 23 is when we implemented it. So much so that last week we just actually started reviewing together the summer 23 grades, right? So we saw how those looked. We will do the same for fall 23. This is a manual approach. So if the student gets a D or an F, this has to be manually converted to an NC, simply because it allows our counselors to work with each student and making sure that they are in a position to either continue or take some time off from dual enrollment, or just wait till they graduate to come to college. But it's an effort that we've put in place, and we're quite frankly excited about it.
Thanks, Phil. And, you know, we've been talking about the what thus far, but I want to start shifting into the how, because what's really clear from your partnership is that over the years, you are like identifying issues, resolving issues, and doing this all at a large scale. So a couple things. I want to bring up our other panelists here to the panel, Marissa and Susan. But back to you, Lisette and Phil, like, how are you doing this all at such a large scale, like as a partnership between the college and the school district? And one of the questions in the chat is just like, how many staff you got working for you?
So I always like to say, and I think Dr. Rodriguez would follow, or she actually leads this, is that it always starts with the articulation agreement, right?
Yes.
Everything has to do with the articulation agreement. Every single semester we review that agreement. There comes a time in the spring semester, probably in late March, that we'll come together and look at things that we can do better. We rely heavily on technology. Okay, we need to leverage technology to service 13,000 dual enrollment students, because the manual processes before the pandemic were just not working. And I think it frustrated a lot of people in the school board, obviously the college. So by leveraging technology and creating a shared portal was instrumental. I think, again, having our campuses go to the schools and having the schools come to our campuses for principal breakfasts, for counselor breakfasts. I think the thing that makes it easy for us is that there's such a mutual alignment in accelerating and expanding dual enrollment across Miami-Dade County between the president of Miami-Dade College and the superintendent of Miami-Dade County Public Schools. In terms of staffing, we have 7 campuses plus an online program. Depending on the size of the campus, it could be anywhere between 3 dual enrollment coordinators to 8 or 9 dual enrollment coordinators. Our Kendall campus has a large team, our North campus has a large team. But the key with that is that we have presence at the high schools. Okay, our dual enrollment coordinators go to the high schools. We have the high schools come to campus. So again, it's just very, very just a mutual work in progress, and it's always a work in progress, and we just continue to strive to make it better.
Thanks, Phil. Lisette, please go.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that I think to make any program partnership with dual enrollment successful, having an articulation agreement, which is where you lay out all the policies and procedures that both institutions are going to agree upon, then that really takes you have sort of an instruction manual, right? So that when you run into a scenario of how do we handle this situation or what do we do about this case, we reference that articulation agreement. Well, what does the articulation agreement say? And that's a document that is reviewed by both our general counsels. It's signed by the college president and our superintendent. And so all stakeholders, and it starts with our leadership, are all in consensus with what the partnership is going to entail and who's going to fund what and timelines for things. All of that is part of our dual enrollment articulation agreement. So I would encourage any school district that's looking to strengthen their partnership with a post-secondary partner to have an articulation agreement in place.
And I know a big part of that is just having the conversation and really thinking through this from both sides. And something that we wrote about in our publications that we learned from both of your partnerships was the importance of aligning on the incentives. So I want to get you all sort of thinking and reflecting on the incentives to take more of a deep approach to dual enrollment from both the college and K-12 side. And just to review some of the things we saw in our field work, you know, from the college perspective, the dual enrollment can really be a source to build back enrollments, and it really helps like locally in terms of just serving the community. And from the K-12s, this can be a way to really attract or retain families in more of an open choice high school environment. And then it can also really just lead to gains in depending on the statewide accountability framework. But let's start from the K-12 perspective. And Susan, I'd love to hear from you. Like, you know, what are the incentives to take more of a deep approach on the K-12 side? And how do you balance dual enrollment alongside all the other advanced courses that you're doing, namely an advanced placement or other advanced offerings?
Well, first off, in the day of our politics, you know, we at Goose Creek strive to offer any option that any private or charter school could offer. So, you know, whatever they could, we want to do it better. And so you can go here and you can leave here and still have that traditional school and get your associate's degree or get your core complete and go straight on into the university with 42 hours of college and at a savings in this community of, like I said, about $45,000. But on top of that, we really take a stake in our community. What does our community need? We live in the middle of Exxon, Chevron. We need lots of welders and pipe fitters, and we need HR directors. And so we align our pathways not just by what our student interest is, but what our community interest is. And we work really well with Lee College to say, hey, this is what the community wants, and how do we make it happen? We recently did that with an HVAC program. We knew that Exxon needed HVAC workers, and they've got a new HVAC program, and we have 2 groups of students that are going and getting their HVAC certification. So on the ISD side, we look at any kind of that $50 of tuition payment that we get from those students. We actually leave it at the campus level so that the campus can use that money, and it builds up to use it for incentives to have, you know, parent nights, because, you know, if you feed them, they will come. So they can use that money any way they want to take college field trips, to purchase food. We have coffee with the counselors. We have breakfasts together. Lee has a lot of good breakfast programs for their partners. So we really look at that. But more than anything, when it comes to being about AP and dual credit, data speaks volumes. And so right now we have an outside evaluator coming in and evaluating our AP programs versus our dual credit. And to be perfectly honest, there is a place for AP, especially when it comes to math and science for those higher level courses. But we see that our kids are somewhere between 86% to 90% effective on passing their dual credit courses with their supports, where we're getting single digits really in our passing of our AP programs. So, like I said, it's just a bigger bang for your buck. And so we present regularly at our board meetings, and we present that information on both sides, our AP program, our GT program, and our dual credit programs. And so educating our community on their options, I would say.
Thanks, Susan. And Lisette, from your perspective, Miami-Dade County Public Schools, they've invested a lot in dual enrollment, but you're also managing a large portfolio of other advanced courses. So how do you balance all this? And what are the incentives to take a deep approach from the school board's perspective?
So for the school district in Miami-Dade, it's about providing as many options to students as possible. I love how Susan said, we want to be the best at everything and have that competitive advantage with our private and charter schools in the community as well. But really just having all the options available for students. And what we have found in overseeing the work of our international programs, IB, Cambridge, and advanced placement courses, is being able to utilize both programs together so that we're leveraging the best of both worlds. And so we're looking at dual enrollment courses. And if you looked at the previous slide of the courses that we're targeting for our College Connect, where we have flexibility with the eligibility, they're courses where there isn't a commensurate AP credit, right? That the student is not going to earn the college credit through a qualifying score because there isn't an AP course, right? So that way students are earning college credits in courses that differ from what they're earning college credits through AP, IB, or Cambridge. And one program then can complement another. And therefore, we've seen growth across our advanced academic programs, which just means more opportunities for students. And it's about finding the right fit for individual students and schools, depending on what academies they have available or what magnet programs they have available, really take advantage of all the different offerings, including our CTE and career dual enrollment, and finding the right fit for their school.
Yeah, that's so smart. And we were so impressed with that work around inventorying that you did initially, to just map what are the opportunities and how do you maximize what's available for students. Okay, so from the college perspective, Phil and Marissa, what are the incentives to take a deep approach to dual enrollment?
So I think for us, Miami-Dade College is such a large system. It has, many of the families that are in Dade County have roots to Miami-Dade College. Our president, graduated from Miami-Dade College. She is very big on serving the community, having, exposing, obviously, Miami-Dade County Public School students, charter schools, home education students, private schools to, college. I think for us, what we do is we do a really good job of creating articulation agreements with many colleges in state, out of state, internationally, if need be. And when we do these I write these transfer agreements. So when we do these articulation agreements, one of those provisions are, you must accept dual credits from our dual enrollment students. You must treat them as regular college students. And what it does is it essentially exposes the student saying, hey, if I start my dual enrollment program in the 9th grade or 10th grade, I then convert to Miami-Dade College. And then from there, we're feeding messaging all the time to all the articulation agreements that we do. They can then look at some of the agreements that we have with, again, I always reference to Georgia Tech because that was one of the most recent ones that we did. So Georgia Tech, University of Miami, University of Wisconsin, I mean, you name it, we have it. So the idea behind it is that we expose them to dual enrollment early. It hopefully increases our conversion rates when they graduate high school, and then obviously they move into one of our bachelor programs or into one of our articulating partners, with incentivized articulation. So it just really, really works well for us. And I think our president, I know you mentioned about financial loss. She walked by my office yesterday and I told her spring we're looking at over 10,000 students. She gave me a high five, right? So that shows that she really, really values the enrollment and the partnerships that we have to bring students into the college and really even go to the high schools and deliver dual enrollment courses.
Leadership is so important. Marissa, anything you'd add on the perspective from
I definitely
incentives?
would echo everything he said. Born and raised in Baytown, went through all the Goose Creek schools. We didn't have these opportunities back then. Not going to tell my age. But what we do have is that we're changing the community. We're allowing students who otherwise would not have gone to college an opportunity to have the supports of the high school as well as the community college. And we also have a lot of students that are completing with 2-year degrees that are putting them straight into industry. And so there's a lot of incentives on our side, not just from that perspective in terms of monetary, like financially, but also what we're giving back to the community and what we're able to provide our community to change the mindset in terms of what it looks like to go to college in the first place. So I definitely agree to everything he said.
Thanks, Marissa. So we have 3 minutes left. So we're going to go into lightning round. Okay, everybody get ready. First, for Lisette and Susan. Start with Lisette. What's one thing that college leaders can do to support their K-12 partners in dual enrollment?
For us, a big deal is the credentialing of our high school teachers to teach dual enrollment courses on the high school campus during the school day, after school. It's made a huge difference in providing access to students.
All right, Susan, what's one thing college leaders can do to support dual enrollment?
So I would second what she said, because that's huge. And I think the biggest benefit that we've gotten together is when we attend conferences together, like NASEP. The learning together is the biggest, I think, shift that I've seen us make.
And Phil, what can K-12 leaders do to support college partners in dual enrollment?
It would be phenomenal if we could somehow find alignment in scheduling. So that would allow more of our MDC faculty to come to classes or teach classes, you know, but the schedule constantly shifts. So it's hard to find that alignment, which makes it very, very difficult. So somehow, some way, if we could kind of figure out what we can do to kind of, you know, address that.
And Marissa, what's one thing K-12 partners can do to support colleges in dual enrollment?
I would agree with him as well, and with Susan. We present together and we also attend conferences together, but we also meet quarterly. And so to continue the quarterly meetings to make sure that we're all on the same page, because Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board and Texas Education Agency do not necessarily always talk. And so we, on our level, our local level, have to figure out through MOUs and just conversations on how we can do our very best with what legislation's been given to us and how we can better serve our students. And so definitely just to continue conversations.
Okay, what's one thing, Susan, what's one thing that you would recommend dual enrollment practitioners do when they sign off to strengthen their dual enrollment programs?
I would say keep an open mind and work together, because you're putting a square peg in a round hole.
Phil, what's one thing that folks can do when they sign off?
Absolutely. I think the idea is be innovative. You know, it's okay to go against what has historically happened. I think that is critical. I mean, articulation agreements and state policy has been in place for a long time. It's okay to question that and try to think beyond that.
Marissa, what's one thing we can do?
Look at your data, look at your programming, see what it says, speak to it, take it back to your partners, and talk about how you can change and fill in some of those gaps.
And Lisette, what's one thing we can do when we sign off?
I agree on the data-driven decision-making and flexibility.
Thank you to the panel. My colleague Sarah has some closing announcements, but we so appreciate these two dynamic duos of deep partnerships for sharing your insights.
Yes, thank you, John, and thank you so much for joining today's webinar. You can access the webinar, the slide deck, and the publications via email. They will be sent to all of you after today's webinar. And we also want to highlight our upcoming DEEP webinar on January 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. This webinar will introduce a new report published by CCRC and the College and High School Alliance that offers guidance to policymakers and college system leaders on how they can support practitioner efforts to strengthen dual enrollment as a more equitable on-ramp to college and career opportunity, as we described today. So thank you again for joining us, and please email us if you have any follow-up questions or if you had a question that we were unable to address in today's chat, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.